Hi, welcome back. In today's lesson, we're going to begin our discussion of early river valley civilizations. Say that one 3 times fast. We're going to start off with Mesopotamia, which most historians agree is the birthplace of civilization. We're going to talk about some of their environmental disadvantages and ways in which they problem solved to combat those challenges. We'll also look at some things like their daily life, their culture, their religion, and then also talk about how they started building empires. So make sure you're in your interactive notebook and follow along as we go. Okay, we're on page 5 of your interactive notebook. The word Mesopotamia actually means in Greek, the land between two rivers. They really hit the nail on the head with that one. Very clever, very creative, because Mesopotamia is located in what becomes known as the Fertile Crescent between the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. You'll see as we talk more in this unit, we have one big commonality between our different civilizations. Rivers. They're all known as early river valley civilizations because they all popped up around rivers. Rivers were huge during this time period because they gave them access to transportation and also gave them access to resources. So that's why most of these civilizations pop up around rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates were very helpful to the ancient Mesopotamians because they did end up flooding about once every year. And you'll remember from our previous discussion on the agricultural revolution, this leads to rich soil, which leads to farming, which leads to multiple settlements popping up. So the fact that the Mesopotamians could harness the power of the Tigris and the Euphrates and use them to help them farm helps prosper the civilization. There were some environmental challenges, though, for this area. The Sumerians pop up about 3300 BCE and they begin farming the land. And as they go through their time there, they figure out that there's some things that are going to present some problems. So they have 3 key challenges. The first is going to be that those floods, while they are great, they were quite unpredictable. Some years there was no rain at all. And as we said before, we need water. No water from rain means the crops aren't going to grow. No crops means no food. No food means no civilization. So they need to find a way to channel that water somehow. The second disadvantage, as you can see from this map here, is that they don't really have any natural boundaries. There's no really any defense around them. We'll see with some other civilizations that they do have, say, mountain ranges, or they're cut off by the rivers kind of solidify them. This area, it's kind of dry, flat land, so there's no natural protection. Lastly, they have very few natural resources. So building materials are going to be scarce. Raw materials for building tools, weapons, buildings, you name it, is also going to be scarce. So the ancient Sumerians have to find a way, work together, problem solve, and figure out how are we going to solve these 3 big disadvantages. All right, let's talk about the water problem first. So even though the water was unpredictable, the flooding was unpredictable, they did find a way to create an irrigation system where they could kind of pool the water or capture the water and save it up so that they could control it and then release it out to the crops. This way they have a constant water source and they can produce those crops and continue farming. The second thing they did is they do find a way to build walls. As you can see in the picture below, most of their cities were walled as a way of defense. And then lastly, how they're going to build those walls, that kind of rolls in with our third challenge, those raw materials. They realize they're going to use the river to go up and down the river and trade with other societies. So they realize that they can trade things that they have, grains, cloth, and tools that they create for those raw materials. So we start off and see our first economies developing, our first system of trade developing, because they're going to trade for things like woods, stones, and metals that'll help them with building, creating more tools and weapons and things like that. So with their organization and their leadership, they're able to kind of develop a system of laws, and we start to see civilization as we know it start coming together. So let's talk about the Sumerian city-states. By 3000 BCE, civilization is starting to grow and expand, and they start to build their city-states around their fields of crops. Each city-state, you want to think of a city-state as like an independent political unit, all within the same general area. Each city had a temple and a ziggurat, and mostly their government was in control by the priests. They were kind of one of the higher ups. We'll talk more about that on the next slide. So Sumer's government is actually controlled by priests at this time. And again, we'll talk more about that when we get to the religion part of this. And then eventually, the priests take a back seat, military leaders become rulers, and they start to set up dynasties that rule after 2500 BCE. As a reminder, a dynasty is basically when one family power is passed down by generation, and they're the ones that are in constant control. So culture in Sumer. Religion. The ancient Sumerians were polytheistic, meaning they believed in multiple gods. There wasn't just this one all-powerful being. They had multiple gods for different things. It's very similar to when we talk about Egypt, how they had a sun god and a rain god and a god of the living and the god of the dead and the god of this and the god of that. Same idea in ancient Sumer. And they did everything to please the gods, because if something went bad, say no rain, no flood, really hot day, whatever, that usually meant that they did something wrong and they pissed off the gods. So daily life was meant to please the gods to keep society humming along. Life in the Sumerian society, we did have social classes that pop up. At the top, we're going to see our kings, our landholders, and priests. Yes, they're still at the top. In the middle, we have our wealthy merchants. And at the bottom, we have slaves. It is really important to note that women in this culture did have a lot of rights. Some of them were artisans and merchants, and some of them actually were even priests. So that's really unique to this society, because a lot of times in these ancient civilizations, women are at the bottom of the barrel. So go ladies. Technology in Sumer, we see the invention of the wheel, the sail for boats, and the plow, which are all big, the wheel for movement, the wheel and the sail for transportation, definitely, and then the plow also, so that we can till the land and, foster farming even more. We see the development of writing, which again, we've talked about this before, with cuneiform, and they also study some of the things that we still study today: mathematics, astronomy, chemistry, medicine. So it's amazing to think that all of these things were being studied and looked upon, in the ancient times of, before the Common Era. Lastly, we want to talk about some of the empires that start to strike up. So for quite some time, about 1,000 years, 3,000 to 2,000 BCE, those city-states are at constant war with each other to control the area. By about 2350 BCE, Sargon of Akkad, probably butchering your name, sorry Sargon, wherever you are these days, he defeats the city-states of Sumer, and he comes into control. He creates what becomes known as the First Empire. Again, as a reminder, an empire is basically when someone takes control of multiple nations or people or independent states and puts them all together under one ruler. So he begins an empire. And his dynasty lasts for about 200 years. Remember, he's not around for 200 years. He just has the power from his name, basically through his bloodline. It's passed down over and over again for about 200 years. Later, the Babylonian Empire becomes really popular. By 2000 BCE, the nomadic group known as the Amorites, they take control of the Fertile Crescent area, and they make Babylon the capital city. From 1792 to 1750, this handsome dude here, known as Hammurabi, he comes in and he is the ruler, and the Babylonian Empire is at its peak during his rule. He becomes well known for a code of laws he creates known as Hammurabi's Code. Very unique title. And then actually after his rule, the Amorites are kind of pushed out and other places take over. So again, this has been just your general overview of the Mesopotamian society. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about Egypt, and we're going to continue our discussion of early river civilizations. So make sure you tune in for that one. Thanks for watching.